the depression was still there, but I was now working out to actively like use brain chemistry to help me out. But I was feeling better, getting better, and I started to help my peers on the ship when we deployed do the same thing. And so getting through this process was and then helping others, I was like, "Oh, I think I figured something out."
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast for military and veterans. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, and provide value and solutions to help make life more abundant. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Ashleigh. She is a dual military spouse and health coach who helps military women lose weight and get stronger so that they feel confident in their bodies and clothes. And unlike most health coaches, she doesn't focus on restrictive dieting, but instead teaches you how to create habits in the 4 pillars of health so you can sustain a healthy lifestyle over time. Ashleigh, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to just get right into your story and hear all about you, your background, why you got into what you're doing today, and then just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was never like a PT stud. I actually, when I was in high school, I was a year-round competitive swimmer. So I was healthy. I had that aspect of my life. But when I went to college at the Naval Academy, I pretty much almost immediately got injured. 'Cause it turns out swimming strength and running strength are 2 different things. And I wasn't really ever taught how to maintain a healthy like lifestyle, habits, anything without the structure of like a sport, which I think is really common, honestly, for a lot of adults, right? So I kind of struggled my way through the academy, borderline not passing weigh-ins, and then, having to be on remedial PT, all those fun things that do a lot of just goodness for our body image and mental health. But, I digress. And then I got to my first ship, and I was stationed on a ship out of Hawaii. And I was someone that like graduating from the academy, I was very, very excited. I was like, yes, like I'm finally going to be in the fleet, like 20-year career ahead of me. This is going to be great. And for the first like 6 months or so on the ship, like I was very excited. I was like, yeah, like ready to be in the things. But I was an engineering officer. And so I was working long hours. As I mentioned, I didn't really know how to take care of myself without some semblance of structure. So my physical health was continuing to decline. And oh, by the way, I wasn't at the academy anymore. So PRT standards were way less strict than they used to be. And then I also started to deal with a little bit more toxicity like at my command leadership level too. So all of these things combined kind of created this perfect storm where my mental and physical health were both suffering, and I started struggling with depression. And this for me was like, it wasn't just the depression, it was also an identity crisis. Because my entire life I had always been this like upbeat, positive, happy person, and that was part of my identity. And feeling like I couldn't shake it. It really did feel like a cloud was following me around. It's such an accurate cartoon, honestly. But like because I couldn't shake this feeling, I was like, well, who am I if I'm not this like happy person? And this continued to the point where, and it took me several years later to admit this to myself, but I was borderline suicidal. I would drive home on the H3 and like look at the guardrail and just think to myself, well, what happens if I just go over? And when I did get to the point of like actually trying to seek help, I went into medical on the ship and told Doc how I was feeling, and he looked at me and goes, I don't know how to help you because I feel the same way. So that to me was basically my like, oh shit moment of, okay, this is now life or death. I've asked for help and support, and I'm not getting it. So like I'm stubborn enough that I was like, all right, I'm going to figure this out myself. But I'm still working insane hours on the ship. I'm still, I'm like, I barely see the sun. So I had to make like really, really small changes. Like, okay, I will work out no matter what time I get home at night. I'm going to do a 20-minute workout because I need to move my body. I need to, regardless of how I'm eating or whatever, like at least limit junk food to single serving size. Like that's where I started. And as those started to kind of fall into place, then I was able to, it's called habit stacking, right? Like then, oh, well, I'm actually feeling better. Let me add this other piece to that puzzle. And, I continued this until I started to feel a little bit better. The depression was still there, but I was now working out to actively like use brain chemistry to help me out. But I was feeling better, getting better. And I started to help my peers on the ship when we deployed do the same thing. And so getting through this process was and then helping others, I was like, oh, I think I figured something out. And I want to help other people figure this out too, because if we can avoid other women going through the mental and physical turmoil that I dealt with while I was stationed in Hawaii, that's good. So that's kind of what the genesis that brought me here.
I love that. And I think there's so much that's relatable in your story, especially when we're talking about going into the military as a former athlete. I can relate to that. I was a swimmer myself too. And you're right. When we're talking about land versus water sports, there's a massive difference. I was in really good shape when I first got into the Navy, and I did really well through boot camp and that structure, having that constant, like, we're going to work out at this time. We're going to eat this. This is your food portions. This is what you're doing every day. It works really well for me. But when you get thrown into the fleet and all of a sudden it's, all right, you're on your own, it is such a night and day difference, especially when all you've ever known is like that structured kind of team workout environment. And the military really advertises it as this is what it is. I think as a civilian before joining, I really thought that it was going to be, all right, every morning we're going to wake up, we're going to PT together, that like training environment mentality. And it can be so hard when you are thrown into this on your own. And you're right, it does affect a lot of people mentally. I gained, I think, 20 pounds in probably my first year in the Navy just because.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, I was like, it was like, oh, you're really good at your PRT, you're passing. All right, well, now you're thrown off on your own. Obviously, you know what you're doing, but I didn't. And self-admitted, even when I was in sports when I was younger, I was not the greatest practicer. Like, I needed that structure. And in some areas of my life, I still recognize that I need that structure. It's just kind of who I am. But what do we do with these people who are in the military and they require that structure? Well, we have the FEP program, which is supposed to be helpful, but I have yet to see a actual successful FEP program. And for those you listening who don't know what that is, that's for the people who fail the PRT. They're supposed to have the workout programs and whatnot. But I'm curious if you could get into talking about the side of things for people who aren't doing as well with their physical fitness, the unhealthy things that we see in the military, to pass BCAs. I think this is a discussion that needs to be had. It's really important.
Yes. I just got like goosebumps even thinking about it because, this topic just like, it hurts my soul. So things that I've seen. Extreme fasting, wearing like sweatsuits and extreme working out, not drinking water, which goes into this extreme fasting, taking diuretics, things that make you poop, laxatives, right? Like, just trying to like empty your body as much as humanly possible. And the the problem here, there's so many problems, but like from a holistic health perspective, you're creating so much more damage to your body long term by doing this. And so, and I mean, I think probably both of us know women that had these tricks to pass BCA, but then it started to get harder and harder, and the tricks didn't really work that much anymore. And it's because you're causing damage to your body, you're causing damage to your metabolism, to your cells, and you need to be able to do like those processes need to happen in order for you to lose weight, to feel good, to like all these things. Because of course, when you're doing all these extreme things like extreme fasting, dieting, laxatives, all the things, especially, and not drinking water. Good Lord, not drinking water. Can't see me, but I'm shaking my fist. It also like it impacts your mental processes too. Like you can feel that your body is not working properly because you can't freaking think. You can't remember anything. So like, yeah, it's, and the thing that kills me is because in the scheme of things, like really, for most people, failing one weigh-in is not going to torpedo your career, right? Like, but we put so much stress and pressure and shame on our bodies, especially as women, because we already are like fighting to be included, to be, thought of as one of the guys, that we can do everything the guys can do, right? Like we already feel like that pressure to prove ourselves. So then if you are the fat girl that can't pass your way in, like it's brutal mentally, like absolutely brutal. I remember when I was at the academy, right? Because like I had stress fractures, so I couldn't work out for a lot of plebe summer. And I had a stigma from that, and I felt shame from that. And when we went into our C trials, which is like the culmination of your freshman year, right? It's like 14 hours straight of physical training. Well, I fell 7 feet on my back and sprained it. I didn't know I sprained it at the time. It hurt a lot. But like I was still like trying through tears, through everything to finish because I felt that shame from basically almost a year ago. Like, that, oh, I didn't prove that I could do this stuff physically, so now I have to. And it took a couple of friends basically being like, if you don't drop out, we will make you, period. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, I think something that comes up for me with that is there are a number of women that I knew in the time that I served that did really, really struggle with either their weight, or maybe they struggled with a specific part of the physical readiness test and not having that time to actually work out. The military is supposed to provide this time if you're on FEP during the day for you to work out, but a lot of commands are like, oh, well, the mission comes first. Oh, well, you can't come into work an hour late every single day because you need to work out because the job comes first. And so it almost trains our brains to put our bodies on the back burner. That, and then on top of that, also training our bodies for unhealthy body image, eating disorders, all these things. And then on top of that, like the outdated standards that the Navy has for women's body types and expecting women to be 100% ready to go back to working out after having a baby. Like, there's so much to unpack here, but let's talk specifically about these body standards and how extremely outdated they are, because it bothers me so much on a different level.
Oh my gosh, you're hitting on like everything that like I should just like set up my soapbox, because these are the things that I just immediately want to rant about. And it, oh god, it killed me too, because at one of my commands I was actually an assistant CFL, right? So like I actually had to weigh people in, and I'm like, oh, it makes me so mad. So first and foremost, I will give credit where credit is due, in that at least like single circumference is an improvement. Right? So compared to the old school rope and choke. And for the uninitiated, we call it a rope and choke because you get measured around your neck, your waist, and for women, the biggest part of your ass, aka your hips. So, which I think we can already agree that depending on your body type or maybe your ethnicity, there's some bias there and there's some
Oh
problems.
yeah.
So that's point one. But it's based off of BMI, and like, can we just cancel BMI? Like, cancel culture. Can we just cancel BMI because it's bullshit? Because first of all, based off of men only, does not account for muscle mass. It does not account for body type. So, even the average person that lifts weights on a regular basis, that just strength trains on a regular basis, the way your body is proportioned per BMI, you're obese. What? Right. Like, so it's so outdated. It's not based on even like accurate science. And it's definitely not based on like any sort of inclusive standard whatsoever. So yeah, it absolutely needs to change. And again, giving credit where credit's due, we're getting better. But it's still absolutely not where it needs to be.
I'd be
And I mean, and this is specifically from the Navy standard, right? Like, the Army and the Marine Corps, from what I understand, like, their weigh-in standards and PT standards have not become more inclusive. So yeah, we still have a long ways to go from there.
I'd be curious to know what the history is of that weigh-in chart that they have for not only the Navy but all the services. Because I know that the chart itself, like the BMI thing, like that method has not changed in, at least from the time that I was in. And it's interesting too, because there's different aspects to this. I know, for one, when I first joined, my height and weight varied depending on who was doing it, which shouldn't be a thing. It should be pretty consistent, but it wasn't.
I grew an inch today. Weird.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then on top of that, there's also this, it depends on who you are mentality, because I have seen the largest men that were exos of commands, 010, magically were passing everything. And I'm like, I know for a fact that you should not have passed, just like, I was also an ACFL, and I remember specifically there was one PRT season, we were doing BCAs, they trusted the E5 and below to do the measuring, and the XO of my command failed, and they threw a fit and said, from here on out, only E6 and above can tape E6 and above and officers. And I found it really interesting, because I'm like, I don't know if it's because we don't trust the junior enlisted or junior officers, because we know that they are more likely to tell the truth or follow the rules to the T. I don't know. This is, obviously complete biased opinion here, but I hear this all the time, and I've even seen it with the actual PRT, where people are fudging numbers to help a friend, and there's this problem in the Navy where we trust that people are going to follow these core values of honor, courage, and commitment, but we're still human at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, we really don't know who half these people are that we're serving with, and it makes it really unfair when you have a woman who just had a baby a year ago, hasn't had the time to really get her body back in the right place, maybe doesn't know how to, and is being thrown into work on top of taking care of a kid, on top of all other life stressors, and we don't want to let you pass, but we're going to let this guy pass because he's a certain rank. Like, there's a huge issue here. Then, I don't even really know where to start with solving something like that, other than culture and getting rid of the shitty people. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I will say that, like, at least in my direct experience, I haven't necessarily seen that bias play out, which is good. But yeah, no, I mean, it definitely, well, well, okay, since commissioned, I would say I haven't seen it played out. At the academy, absolutely. And they were like, especially like fudging numbers and things like that, absolutely saw it. Yeah, and it's, yeah, I think the military is trying to get back towards a culture where there's more accountability, which you would think should be like such a value in the military, but like holding people accountable to like doing the right thing or like actually doing their job is hard apparently. But I think with there's I think it's SecNav. Oh my gosh, SecNav or CNO, who knows, one of them. They're coming out saying, hey, we need to look at getting real, getting better. Like let's have some like honest feedback and like actually call out the problems. I think as the military continues like towards that vein, like that's really beneficial. The fact that the Navy is now certifying coaches and like is recognizing that coaching is valuable is amazing. And I had the privilege to actually coach some of the coachees as they were going through their program. So I mean, I think there are things that are in the right place, but frankly, I don't really see the major culture changes happening until some of those old salts go ahead and retire.
Agreed. Can you talk a little bit more about the coaching program for people that don't know? Because I think a lot of people in the Navy don't know of the resources that are out there. And so I know you and I had chatted previously and you mentioned this, and I think it'd be great for you to share that.
Yeah, and I will be fully transparent that I don't know all the ins and outs specifically of the program. When the message first got released of like, hey, we're looking for volunteers for this program, I was like, that's amazing. And then I read down to the very bottom message, it's like, oh, and by the way, if you're already a certified coach, please email us here. We'll put you in our database. Cool, which is what I did. And so from that, essentially, it's actually DoD wide, which is also rad. But folks applied and went through. I think it's a 3 to 6 month program somewhere in there. But it is a full coaching certification through an accredited program. And for those who don't know, for coaching, you essentially want to look to see if programs are ICF credentialed. Because that's essentially how the regulation works in the coaching industry, because it's an unregulated industry. But what's cool now is you have these people that are certified coaches that are going to the commands and saying, hey, I'm available as a resource. And it can be obviously really daunting if you are like, depending on where you're at in the rank structure or, maybe male, female, or, however you identify gender wise. It can feel a little daunting, especially if you don't know what coaching is. You're like, what is this even supposed to be? So the purpose of coaching is essentially to help you be on the path of the best version of yourself. That's kind of how I look at it, right? So you could be struggling with something and you're like, hey, I want to find a little bit more direction here. Or you could also be saying, hey, what career options do I have? What do I actually want to be doing in the Navy? What do I want to, I've been thinking about starting a family. What would that look like, right? There are so many, every topic is an open topic for coaching. And what the coach's job is to do for you is essentially ask open-ended, powerful questions to help you think and noodle through things. So they're not giving you advice. They're not passing judgment. They're not mentoring you. Mentoring and coaching are two different things. A lot of leaders in the military confuse this, but they are two different things. And so these sailors now that are trained to be coaches, they should understand that, right? So that is a resource that hopefully you'll see more in the different commands, and utilize them because they want to help. They applied to these programs because they want to make a difference. So that's my plug about about the coaching program.
So the coaching, it's not just a health and fitness thing. It's like a life coaching, if I'm understanding correctly, or is it more in the health and fitness niche?
No, they're the program they went through is like life coaching.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
anyone can sign up for this as far as you know? That's obviously in the military.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some eligibility criteria, like,
Yeah.
no NJP within whatever, right? Like standard stuff. But yeah, as far as I know, and I mean, both of the uh, coaches that I kind of coached and mentored through their progression, both of them were first classes, right? So, which is also like, that's also a really cool thing about being like working in that realm is like, I'm a lieutenant, but as a coach, I can help anyone and rank doesn't matter. I've coached people senior to me, obviously junior to me. I've been coached by folks both senior and junior to me. Like it's a really cool dynamic that can also just help you. I don't know. I think it helps us remember that people are people too, and not just like a rank or a title.
I love that. And I think, you're right. That's phenomenal that the Navy's implementing something like this, if used correctly, could really make a huge difference, not only in people's physical, but also mental well being. And then, also looking at getting rid of like the rank structure in a coachee relationship, because there is so much that people that come into the military don't know. A lot of these people are 17, 18-year olds that have never worked a job a day in their life, and now all of a sudden you're thrust into this position of authority. And it's okay to not know everything, but to have someone there. I'm a huge advocate for coaching. I've utilized coaches myself in several areas of my life, and to me, sometimes coaching, although very different than therapy, it is just as powerful as therapy for a lot of people if that works for you. A lot of people use it in conjunction with therapy. I've done that before too. So um,
Absolutely.
I would definitely be curious to learn more about that resource. And I encourage anyone listening to this episode to look into that resource, not only for maybe yourself, but maybe someone that you know. Knowledge applied is definitely power, in my opinion. So I actually would love
Absolutely.
to talk a little bit more about the mental health side of things. You mentioned in your story that you had hit a couple of low points. Didn't realize that you were having suicidal ideations until later, which I think is an important point that you made. But also when it came to getting help, being rejected. Um, how did you process that in your head?
Oh man. Um I I mean, so I think I have a bit of a benefit in that um my mom is a mental health counselor. So I was raised in an environment that was very pro therapy, pro counseling, pro mental health, right? So I thankfully at least had some counterbalance to the stigmas. I'm not going to say I wasn't susceptible to any of the stigmas, but at least I had some counterbalance. Um, Working in engineering, like I remember a sailor went to medical and came back with a letter that was like, I'm having mental health issues. Like, I can only work basically regular working hours. And he was like not treated with kindness and respect and empathy. People will basically like, oh, you're just trying to get out of work because everything sucks right now. Um, so that was kind of the environment I was in, and so I was already kind of like, okay, well, what can I do on my own to try to figure this out? Um, and I started with what I did know. Like, okay, I am aware that I'm struggling. I need to move my body more. I need to eat healthier foods, drink whatever, right? Like I started with those small things. But the other thing that I did, and I know that I am very privileged in this experience and that I had a department head and a chief that I trusted and respected. And so I also confided to them, "Hey, like I'm struggling. Like this is how I'm feeling." I wouldn't have said that I had suicidal ideations at the time. But I did say, like, I'm struggling with depression. Like, I basically leave my car after, like, I leave work after, a full day and cry at my car. Like, I'm I'm really having a hard time. So they understood that, hey, giving me grief about going to get my workout in, or, trying to leave at a reasonable hour so I could see the sun, was, if they had given me like a hard time for that, like, that would not have been beneficial, right? That would not have been helpful. So it helped me create a little bit more empathy, just like in my direct space, that I think was really beneficial. And even like through deployment, sometimes they would like check in and be like, hey, how's it going? Or I'll be like, hey, the thing I told you about, like, yeah, it's not better. Like, I'm still having a hard time. Like, just so they kind of understood that, because I think, like so many of us, I put on a really good front. I had a sailor at the end of deployment tell me, ma'am, I don't think you ever had a bad day. You always had a smile on your face and upbeat. And like, I consider that a success, because I don't, my junior sailors did not need to know about my struggles, right? Like, they have their own struggles. I'm there to be a leader. But that also shows, like, to what extent I was hiding how I actually was feeling to pretty much everyone else.
Yeah, I think you bring up a couple really good points here. One, from a leadership perspective, knowing that just checking in on someone, believing someone, and supporting them can be life or death for someone. I'm so glad that you had that support for you. And I think a lot of times leaders don't quite know how to process that conversation when someone is like, hey, I'm struggling. Some leaders will go to the extreme of, we need to send you to the psych ward, and we need to, send you to mental health. I've heard of people where their command literally checks them in to the like suicide prevention program, SAIL. I've heard of that before. And realistically, every person's going to be different. For you, it was just needing that support, because it sounds like you recognized a lot of your own things and a lot of your own needs because you kind of grew up in that environment. But everyone's going to be a little different, I think, at the end of the day. And I say this repeatedly, going back to being human, having these humanistic conversations, asking, what do you need? How can I support you? I think that is huge in itself. But yeah, I think another thing we don't talk about enough is how the leaders, they struggle too. And, I can't necessarily blame your medical practitioner for saying I'm feeling the same way, but at the same time, like, that's your job is to help people. It's such a like multifaceted dynamic here when we're talking mental health. But I'm glad that you were able to recognize what you needed and then have that support, because a lot of people don't. But you had that smile on your face every single day through the struggle. And I think a lot of the people that are the most depressed do have a smile on their face through their struggles until they hit that breaking point in their life. So, when we're talking about habit stacking, is that something that you learned from your background in your childhood, or is this something that you learned through a personal development journey? Because I don't think a lot of people quite understand what that is, and so I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because like there's some things where, so through this kind of health and personal development journey, I felt like I kind of figured out a lot of things, right? And then if you read Atomic Habits, when I read that book, I was like, oh, this is the language that goes with the things I figured out, right? So it was kind of like self-discovery, and then, reading, listening to podcasts, all these things. I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually like a scientific thing that I figured out. Go me. So habit stacking is essentially the practice of pairing a habit you already have with a new one you're trying to adopt, in order to change your habits, right? Change your habits, change your life. They're like, we are creatures of habits. It's how we live. So, and like James Clear, Atomic Habits, he talks about like the 4 laws of habit change. Um, and habit stacking kind of goes under the make it easy, because you're pairing it with something that you already do. So what's an example? An example is, okay, well, I was already cooking myself dinner most nights, right? That is already a habit I had. So a way I kind of shaped and stacked that habit is I started to focus on cooking healthier meals. And if I allowed myself a treat or a glass of wine, whatever, I stuck to a single serving size. Um, and so again, the habit was I was already cooking, but then the healthier shift of it, the stack, was how I was cooking and how I was paying attention to portion sizes.
No, I love that.
So,
Um,
yeah.
I think that the biggest thing for me when it comes to learning habit stacking is the small changes in getting 1% better every
Yes.
day. Because I truly
Absolutely.
believe that the military instills this mindset of like, you have to learn a bulk of knowledge and make a major change almost overnight. I think in a lot of these
All or nothing.
commands and right when it comes to training, learning a new thing, learning a new skill, the military is very much go go go. You have 2 weeks to learn this, and then all of a sudden you need to be the expert, and so it almost trains our brains as military veterans to feel like we have to learn these huge things all at once. And so that was my biggest challenge with habit stacking, and still something that I work on till this day. But I think you brought up such a
Hmm.
valid point of you made a small change and then you added a little
Yes.
bit more and then you added a little bit more, and that was really helpful for you. So Atomic Habits is a phenomenal book, and I highly encourage
Hmm.
anyone listening to check it out. Now, you're working with people in the health space currently, or are we not doing that yet?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So, I really, it's more of a. I'm also transitioning out of the military, so I have very little
Doing a
time.
lot.
Um,
Yeah.
yes, things. No, so I am a health and wellness coach that focuses or primarily serves women in the military community. So that's active duty, veterans, and spouses. Um, and what I teach is essentially habit creation in what I call the 4 pillars of health, which are food, fitness, sleep, and mindset. And kind of to your earlier point, one of the reasons I break it into pillars is because I want people to focus on one thing at a time and create one tiny habit in one pillar and see how that goes. And then let's move to the next one, right? Um, so that's been really rewarding just to see how people transform, and it's not like, at the end of the day, health is not about how you look, right? Like, so seeing people start to treat themselves with love and respect. I had a client who was having fertility issues, and she and I were actually, we went to the academy together. We were on, mandatory PT together for not passing the weigh-ins, right? Like, so we went way back. She was having fertility issues, and after we, like, about a month after we finished working together, got pregnant. Like, those are the things, and to think about the toxicity in how we treat health in the military, and that is keeping people from embracing who they are, loving themselves, starting a family, like feeling like they're enough. Like, I have yet to meet a woman in the military that is not a total badass that is juggling like 5 million things, but then at the same time is like, I'm not doing enough. And like, I do it too.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, I feel bad. I'm not doing enough. I'm like, what?
Yep. Yeah, you see it a lot, especially when it comes to families and work and collateral
Mm-hmm.
duties and On top of that, standing watches and making sure that you look good every day. Because, as a female,
Yep.
there's a certain scrutiny that's placed on, women in general of holding
Yeah,
a
but
certain
don't look
standard.
too good.
Exactly, right?
Your hair
Like,
look good, but don't look too good.
yeah, yeah. Don't wear too much makeup, but make sure
Hmm.
that your hair looks nice. And there's just so much pressure, and that alone, the stress of trying to be the perfect representation of females in the military, which I think is what a lot of it comes down to. It can destroy your body, like mentally, in your
Absolutely.
gut, everything. And then talking about, which we could spend another hour talking about how a lot of people are eating. I hear boat life is different.
Yep.
I've never been on one of those, but
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Boat life is fun when you like run out of veggies.
Yeah, the
You're like, I don't
snacking, the vending machines, the trying to get in
Red
something,
Bull,
or
energy
not
drinks.
eating at all.
Yep.
Sometimes, it's just,
Hmm.
I've seen people literally come off the boat looking like they were in like a prison camp or something. Like they lost so much weight because I hear the food is just disgusting. I've seen pictures of moldy food. Like I don't know if that's actually how it is. Because again, I've never been on one.
It
But
depends.
yeah.
You learn what you will and will not eat. And pro tip, right, for anyone deploying anytime soon, find a protein powder that has amino acids, vitamins, minerals, right? Like find a like whole food protein powder. Set yourself up for like a recurring subscription, or make sure you can buy it on Amazon, whatever. But like bring that with you on deployment, because then at the end of the day, regardless of when you have run out of fruits and veggies, you don't want to eat because you're not sure whatever they've made is actually safe for consumption. You have at least one meal that is nutritionally beneficial for your body. Like that is my deployment pro tip, because it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And hopefully that gives hopefully that gives some value to some people. I see it on the internet a lot of times. People are like, "I'm deploying. I don't know what to do." And I think you hear a lot of the negatives, and you hear a lot of horror stories, or you hear positives that are like not really beneficial. It's just kind of like a positive experience, but um, you don't always hear people giving things that are actually helpful for people deploying. So I appreciate you sharing that. Where can women that want to work with you find you to reach out?
Yeah. So a couple of places. And again, I am transitioning, so my social media presence is not necessarily as active as it usually is right now. Um, because that's the first thing to go when my mental health is you know, bothered. Anyway, so but I'm on Instagram at Ash McGee Coach, ASHMAGEE Coach. I also have a Facebook group called Healthy Women Warriors and a podcast by the same name. I'm releasing new episodes every other week because transition. I'll get back to weekly eventually. Um, but yeah, those are the best places to find me. And I do put out a weekly email that's really, they're mostly like stories of shenanigans, but linking back to my podcast episodes or health resources, all the things.
Awesome. Well, I'll link everything below for anyone that wants to reach out to Ashleigh or check in with her. And hopefully, a few ladies reach out to you, because I know what you do is really, really needed in not only the active duty reservist community, but also for veterans. We hear body image and health issues that come up a lot. So I really appreciate that you do what you do. And Ashleigh, I really appreciate you being on the show, taking the time to share a bit of your story with the audience. And maybe we'll do a body image episode sometime with a few other women. I've been wanting to do that because I know this is like a round table panel thing that we could talk about for hours, but would love to just continue this conversation and keep bringing awareness. And I will link your podcast for anyone that wants to listen, because I am going to be on Ashleigh's podcast And so you can
Yep.
hear a little bit about me and my story on there as well. And we'll be looking forward to hearing more from you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you and I have a lot of alignment of like, these are the things we need to be talking about, right? Like these topics that have so much stigma around them, like bringing them to the surface and actually having a conversation. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing as well, and I'm so delighted that we connected and we're doing some podcasts together.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks again, Ashleigh.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Each week, I'll be bringing you value in the mental health space and its direct impact on service members and veterans. If you feel you personally got value today from this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and share this to your audience. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.